Alright, everyone, I'm back. It's actually been about 24 hours since I left here, so about 2 in the morning when I took off last night, but not quite that late right now, luckily. Reassemble where we left off. Oops. A lot of times when you're threading these nuts on and relying heavily on the threads to hold everything, I'm going to make sure that the threads come all the way to about the top of the nut at minimum to reduce the risk of stripping it. Doesn't feel quite right. I think the threads are just a little dirty. I believe the threads on these studs are marred a little bit from the factory to keep them from backing out. Kind of like to lock them in place. About as far as we can go. So hopefully that's not too far, because that cover still has to be put on, and the threads have to go all the way through it. Studs will go in a little further than they need to be. I'm not going to be able to try to start this yet because I need to find a fuel line and also take this fuel tank off. make sure everything's clean there. I'll be sure to record the process. This fuel line is too dry rotted to reuse, but I'm going to slip it on just to help keep dirt out of there for now. Still got to clean this cover here. Still full of dirt. Make sure you get all that out if you got any in there. This gasket is still in good shape. So, you can reuse that just like the others, luckily. Sometimes they'll tear and you'll have to replace them or put a little bit of gasket maker on it to seal it up. You can buy new gaskets too. A lot of the carburetors sometimes come with it. Just taking a microfiber cloth and wiping it out. I don't really want to spray that brake cleaner on this. It's not great for plastics or rubber. Carburetor cleaner is a little safer for that. And looks like it's in good shape. The studs are still sticking out enough to thread the nut on. This crankcase breather hose is barely long enough to do its job. To keep that in mind in the future. Might replace that if I can get this thing working well. Luckily that hose is still pretty pliable and does not need to be replaced at the moment. This filter, that's all creased and pinched. I'm just gonna get the big pieces of dirt off. Any hair. Try to reuse it for now, because we are still in the testing phase of this generator. Don't really want to put much money in it until I know it's gonna run. I'm skipping ahead. I need to put these nuts on. These don't need to be super tight. You want them pretty snug. Make sure your breather line is still in place. There you go, I think you can see that now. In here. dryer's done. It appears that this is how the filter was sitting in there. Although, I think it goes like this. Maybe. That's how it was originally. It has 2 layers, but they're not the same size, which doesn't make sense. I'm actually going to flip this over. I think it was backwards. And tuck it all in there. Actually, I may be wrong. I think that goes in first. Should have paid attention. Probably gonna have to replace this filter in the future. Because it is a bit deformed. Just want to get these hand tight too. Well, now it's time to take the fuel tank off. I believe those are also 10mm. And those are just 4 bolts in each corner. 2 on this side, 2 on the back side. I am thinking about trying to drain some of this fuel out of the tank before I remove it all the way. So I'm gonna grab a bottle real quick. See if I can get any fuel out of here. How long that's gonna take. The valve seems to be clogged. So nothing's really coming out of that valve. So I think it's clogged. And boy, does this gas smell very old. You'll know if your gas is stale because it just gets very strong and pungent smelling. This line in the middle, so still have something helping prevent dirt from getting in that carburetor inlet. Not as much fuel in here as I thought there was. That's good. Some of the rubber spacers underneath of the tank. Put those over here. Don't want to lose any of that stuff. Well, everything seems to be pretty okay. There's this compression fuel. That's good. Fix this cool rope eventually. Guess what I'm gonna do next is put this generator on the floor and see if I can get this tank up here to take apart where you can see it. We're gonna take this valve out of here. See what that stuff looks like. There we go. Typically, if you have to leave gas in your generator or any carbureted or really anything anymore, you're gonna put fuel stabilizer in it. It's a cheap preventative measure. This seal down here is very dry rotted. There you go. So I want to believe it was probably leaking there. I'm gonna remove this little rubber seal with a small screwdriver. believe I can just get a correct sized O-ring and replace it. But it's very kind of melted from all the gasoline over time and heat, I'm sure. And brittle. And I'm sure some people would say they'd just buy a new one, new valve, new carburetor, new hose, and just, replace it all. But not everyone is able to do that. And sometimes you just can't get parts. You don't know if you're in an area where you can get packages, and that's further delaying. Sometimes you need stuff to run now, or as quickly as you can. Sometimes you can't help it. You gotta order stuff. Use my little piece of wire here to clean the threads a little bit. I have a wire brush, but I don't feel like getting up. This works. Just want to get all those rubber particles out of there. So it's as clean as you can when you go and put it back together. Clean as it can be, at least. And there you go. That seal sits in a recess in this valve. So I'm just going to try to find an O-ring that fits it and put it back together. The filter element is actually in pretty good shape. So I'm going to leave that alone. Yep, that's it. I think you can see it there, yeah. Fits in that groove nice, and it actually sits a little above this flange, which you need, because when you tighten it up, it smushes. Gonna go ahead and thread it back in this tank now. Set these O-rings to the side. I'm gonna dump this fuel, what's left of it, out of this tank real quick. pretty nasty. Now I can thread it back in. This is adjustable. This valve swivels inside that nut. Didn't realize that at first. But you gotta make sure you position this in the right direction so it's pointing back at your carburetor. And good to go. Gonna pause this, drop it back on the generator. All right. Assemble everything in the reverse order. Make sure your spacers are under the tank. And I'm just going to tighten these up crisscross. And they just need to be snug. cover off so I can get back to that fuel line. Kind of surprised it didn't come with clamps, but whatever. Let's see here. And make sure your filter's going in the right direction. If you install one, it's got a little arrow. This is a old line from another project. Repurposing stuff. Figure out your length. Right here I do. I think that'll work for now. I'll be installing clamps on these later, but for now, that should let me test it. I guess I'll put a little bit of fuel in this guy. Also check the oil real quick. I believe I did this not long ago and it was fine. Still clean. Really starting to believe that this was purchased and never used. Oh, that's good. Unfortunately, a bit of rust in the bottom of this tank, but it looks It's like surface rust. It's no loose, flaky stuff. So filters should catch anything that comes through. No, I'm not going to fill this thing. Just put enough in it to see if it'll fire. Valve's not leaking. So far it's alright. Let's see if we get any fuel through here. I think a little bit come through. Let's put some more fuel in. Probably not enough in there to come above that threaded fitting yet. I think that'll be enough. Still no leaks. Let's open this valve up again. There we go. Oop. Shut that off. I am definitely going to need a clamp on these fittings. Not quite enough pressure on the flared bit to keep it closed. Let me see what I can find. Alright, so if you couldn't see before, this is the hose. I already had an inline filter, so I'm going to use that. And it goes down to the carburetor. These zip ties are just for testing purposes. They will not be staying here. So please do not copy this and leave that as a permanent part of your generator. Not safe. They will break and leak. Well, we have oil, we have fuel. I think I'm gonna put this cover on, back on the carburetor, and see if I can get it to fire. Real quick here, always be sure to check your work, because this bowl of the carburetor, before I grabbed this and set it down on the floor to test, I noticed this bowl was not seated correctly in the gasket, and it was weeping gasoline very slowly. So always double check your work once you put fuel to it. Make sure nothing's leaking. See what happens. Oh, it's stuck. Thought I didn't get just a little stuck. Let's try it again. Just need to tighten up a couple things. Alright, so I am done with my testing on this. Fuel is turned off. It does run and makes electricity. That shop vac, I'm not sure exactly how many watts it is, but I think it's about 800 to 1,000. It was a decent test just to make sure that it makes electric. I'm confident it should work just as intended. I will have to replace this carburetor, unfortunately, because of that broken section in the bottom that holds the bowl on. I just cannot get that bowl to seat correctly and not leak. I might play with it a little more, see if I can get around it, do a workaround somehow. This bowl was leaking on this carburetor. I ended up taking an extra washer I had laying around and putting it underneath that washer and gasket. You can see it there. There we go. That tightened that up. Because that stem in the inside of the carburetor was busted, I think it just wasn't able to pull it up tight enough without that extra washer in there. But no more leaks there. Got the hose clamps on now. Should be all good to go now. So I'm gonna run this thing over the winter here and there and put some runtime on it. I'll keep everyone updated on how it's going. Thanks for watching.